Hello and welcome back to my channel. Apologies for the break, I was working on art again. Anyway, today I'm going to be drawing a festive Christmas Ent, and I hope you enjoy watching. The first thing I did was to sketch out a rough drawing of the Ent and then a Christmassy scene around it. And then I moved on to a first sort of a sketch where I'd figure things out in much more detail. I find that this helps me for the final rendition just figure things out a lot easier, especially proportion, and with this I tried to do some foreshortening, making it look like the top claw is shooting out the page and much closer to the person looking. It also allows me to just add extra details that I might not think of when I'm doing the final sketch or drawing. After I've done that first initial sketch, I will then turn the opacity down on that and lower the size of the brush, and then I go in for the final sketch, or the most final sketch. And this is just really trying to get in all the details and making sure that everything looks how I want it to, and that everything is in proportion and everything gets the effect that I'm trying to put across. One problem with doing the multiple sketches is I tend to almost lose some of the action in my drawings, so I have to really focus on making sure that I recapture the initial movement that I get in that first sketch that's really loose in the final concrete drawing. Recently I've been enjoying trying to experiment with texture and foreshortening, completely different things, but I'm really trying to use these to amp up my drawings. I'm also trying to use much more effects, like glowing effects. I don't particularly do any glowing effects in this one, but I do some edge highlighting, and I try and do something special with the light instead of it just being a basic light and dark. Here I start adding detail to the wood to make it look like it's wood texture, and this was basically just adding lots of lines and varying their thickness, and also trying to add some little like holes and stuff like that. This is just to make the piece look full and look more like a piece of wood instead of just a brown colour. For some of the larger, more bark-like places, I try to do a almost squiggly pattern, and then for this collar, I almost imagine it like some sort of moss, just to add some more festive parts to this design. For the jacket, the jacket like bark, I basically did the same thing as the smaller sections, but with much thicker lines and much less sort of circles. I found that this just added variation to the tiny ones, and it made it again look more like bark. These sections probably turned out my favourite because of the squiggly patterns, and then I did just some straight lines on the lower pieces because that's what the inner sections of a tree looks like, I guess. On the claws, I just again did the multiple lines. I tried to give them a curve so that it looked like they were more round instead of just flat. Once I'd done all of the rest of the body, I moved on to the largest section, which is the legs, or like roots area. And because it's such a large area, I decided that instead of just doing the detail on every single root individually, I would instead just try and mimic the movement of the creature with these lines, just to make sure it still flows and just to add that extra movement. Then I began to add a background. This was just going to be a simple moon in the back, a tree to the side, some clouds, and then just a snowy bottom, just to try and add some sort of Christmassy theme to the design, as it right now doesn't look that Christmassy. Then I move on to colouring, and in the colouring I tried to add a sort of reddish hue to all of the browns, and I tried to use the fill tool, but that just didn't work. But yeah, I was trying to add the red hue to all of the tones to try and make sure that they all linked in, and that they were that sort of Christmassy red colour that is associated with Christmas very often. Some of the larger sections I covered in this darker brown because I imagined them more like bark, and then I went to the lighter sections, sort of inner, that I'd imagine coloured like the inside of a tree. And then I would move on to the rest. But my favourite thing about the colouring is how I managed to tie it in all together with that red hue throughout most of it. I went really red for this jacket section as well, which really made it more festive, especially with the green collar that goes around that I imagine being some sort of moss. The part that I found most difficult to colour was actually the inner chest and then the rest of the wood, because I found that choosing the colour, it turned out either way too orange or way too yellow, and I wanted sort of more beige, and it was just a struggle trying to find the right colour. I eventually started to try and look up colours to try and find that on the colour picker, and that eventually worked to an extent. You can see here it's quite green, and then it goes orange, and then it's slightly darker and more brown. For the rest of the Ent, I tried to use the fill tool as much as possible. However, I found that this actually made lots of the because there was no colour next to the lines, it pretty much made the detail non-existent. So I just had to recolour over all of the detailed lines. So it sped up the process a little bit, but not too much. I could have just filled it in manually. Then I went into the background and started doing the background. These were just going to be a basic, not even shading sort of background. I made the clouds transparent so they looked more like clouds, and I really like how I've put the sort of blue snowflakes in front. It adds something to the scene, so it's not just the background, it's everything. Then I go into trying to add a little bit of shading. I didn't want to make this piece too dark because then it would sort of sink into the background, so I just went in with some rough shading with like one dark tone. The trickiest bit was this red. I had to try and think of how the light would hit from the moon, how it would actually hit the red on both sides. I think I could have made this piece a lot darker, and then I just made the eyes black. I tried to add a little bit of shading to the tree, though it kind of just gets lost in the piece, and I don't really think that was necessary. Anyway, I then add some small highlights with the colour of the moon, just to tie it in with the rest of the piece. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next video. See you next time.